Thank you, Mr. Belokas. Thanks also for your challenging invitation. I'd also like to welcome all of you, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for your kind attendance this evening. My name is Georgios Remoundos, and I'm here on behalf of the Marine Pollution Prevention Equipment and Cargoes Department of the Design and Construction Directorate of the Ministry of Development, Competitiveness and Shipping, the relevant General Secretariat for Shipping. It's too long, I know. I'm here for a brief introduction to the existing regime regarding the mandatory technical and operational measures already in force or that will be in force very soon. The issue for the contribution of the maritime industry to the global effort for greenhouse gas emissions reduction was basically primarily addressed by the Kyoto Protocol of the UNFCCC, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. The relevant discussion within IMO, which is, of course, the ruling competent organization for this issue, had already began some years ago. During those discussions, the corresponding proposals to deal with this problem focused from the one hand in technical aspects, in technical and operational measures, for example, the EEDI, the Energy Efficiency Design Index, as well as the Ship Energy Efficiency Management Plan, and the operational measure of the Energy Efficiency Operational Indicator. And from the other hand, in market-based measures, like the ETS, the levy on fuel, etc., and some other hybrid systems, let's say. But it was not before the previous MEPC 62 session, where mandatory requirements on technical measures were agreed and adopted through the resolution 203/62. According to the requirements of this regulation, an energy efficiency design index should be calculated for every new ship which is involved in international voyages with a gross tonnage above 400, and in addition, a ship energy efficiency management plan should be developed for that kind of vessels, but not only for the new ones, meaning those constructed after January of 2013, but also for existing vessels. Furthermore, guidelines regarding the calculation of the attained and required design index, as well as guidelines for the elaboration of the so-called SEMP, meaning the Ship Energy Efficiency Management Plan, and the corresponding procedures for the survey, verification, and certification were also prepared and finalized, hopefully, during the last MEPC session, which was the session that was completed last week, 63, MEPC 63, and some relevant resolutions were released. Unfortunately, we don't have the numbers of the resolution at the time, but hopefully after the final report is released, we will know the names, the numbers of the resolutions. It was also decided that the MARPOL Convention, although greenhouse gases actually the emissions of greenhouse gases are not pollutant ones, but it was decided that the most appropriate instrument to incorporate those requirements is MARPOL Convention, and in particular Annex 6, since it's obvious that this would not need more time-consuming ratification procedures in order to issue a new convention. So you see in this card the two mandatory measures, the technical measure, which is the Energy Efficient Design Index, which is adopted by Resolution 203, and the operational mandatory measure, which is the Ship Energy Efficiency Management Plan. I call it operational. It's a technical measure, actually, but it can also take into account some tools, operational tools, like the Energy Efficiency Operational Indicator. It can be used when somebody wants to elaborate a SEMP. Well, the formula for the attained index is a complicated one, as you see. It's not my intention to go through details, but you see, the EDI reflects actually the environmental cost of CO2 emissions as a result of the operation of the ship's power installations against the benefit of the society, which in our case is the transfer workload of the ship, which is expressed as the nominal load capacity, in most cases it's dead weight, times the service speed. As we see in this complicated mathematical formula, in the nominator, we see some terms representing the defined, through, of course, specific technical transformations. It's the defined CO2 emissions of the main and auxiliary engines of the ship, deducted. Of course, we have to deduct any renewable or waste recovery energy systems installed on the vessel. Then we have the required EEDI, and of course, we need the attained index to be less or at least equal to the corresponding required EEDI. And the required index corresponds to, let's say, a best fit curve for each type of vessel, for the vessels you see on the table, which is the result of a regression analysis assessment of the estimated values of specific scattered values, let's say, on a diagram, which is the EEDI against dead weight, in most cases, of existing ships' data. And these data were collected by IHS Fairplay database. So the maximum value of the required EEDI is reduced in some time phases, through some time phases, is reduced by a relevant reduction factor. You see the X value, according to the next table. In the next years, there will be a relevant reduction of this factor, so the case will be more strict as we go on. Try to be brief, so I go on with. Here, it's something very familiar to everybody, I think. We see a typical marine power plant installation and the typical power flow. It's what to add and what to deduct in the formula, in the formula's nominator, as we saw before. The Ship Energy Efficiency Management Plan, according to Regulation 22 of Chapter 4, Annex 6 of MARPOL, which was amended accordingly after the release of Resolution 203, may be a part of the ship safety management system. So we can incorporate the SEMP in the existing SMS of the vessel, taking, of course, into account the relevant guidelines. According to these guidelines, the framework and structure of the SEMP is based on this, I would say, quality management concept, which reminds us the so-called Deming circle. You know, it's plan, do, check, act. And of course, in the SEMP, we have to refer to some basic best practices recommended in the guidelines that have to be taken into consideration when preparing the manual, as referred in the card. More or less are familiar practices to everybody involved in the shipping industry, like fuel-efficient operations. We have to improve the voyage planning, the weather routing. We have to optimize the speed, optimize the shaft power. Then we have to take into account issues having to do with optimization of the ship handling, the hull maintenance, of course, propulsion system maintenance, waste heat recovery. We have to improve the way we manage the fleet. We have to improve the cargo handling. We have to also take some measures to improve our energy management tools, maybe use new fuel types, and other measures, including computer software programs for fuel consumption management, the use of renewable energy sources, cold ironing, etc. In this card, according to the amended Annex 6 of the MARPOL Convention, the scope of the application of the mandatory requirements regarding the energy efficiency of ships is reflected. So, we see that the relevant requirement for EEDI applies to ships of gross tonnage above 400, engaged in voyages to ports or offshore terminals under the jurisdiction of other parties. So basically, we're talking about international voyages only. The ship types are bulk carriers, gas carriers, tankers, container ships, general cargo ships, refrigerated cargo carriers, and combination carriers for the moment, because at the moment we have reference lines only for that kind of vessels. And also, and of course, it's very important to have in mind that the requirements for EEDI is applicable only to new ships, meaning ships constructed after January of 2013, or in the absence of a building contract, ships that their keel was laid after July 2013, or the date of delivery is after July 2015. The ships that are not yet included in the scope of the relevant requirements are ships with diesel-electric propulsion or turbine propulsion or hybrid propulsion systems. And also there's a clause in the relevant requirements that the flag administration may waive some vessels from the requirement of the application, but this waiver should not exceed maximum 4 years. So we're talking for ships constructed from January 2017 the most, and in the same way, the delivery should not exceed this date, 2019, July of 2019. From the other hand, SEMP is also required to be provided on all vessels, new and existing, of gross tonnage above 400, also engaged in international voyages. And the main difference between EEDI and SEMP requirement is that SEMP is applied to all ships, existing and new. You see here a simplified flowchart showing the basic steps for the preliminary verification and approval of the EEDI, of course by the competent authority, which might be basically the flag state administration, or of course a duly authorized, recognized organization. There are two basic steps. The first step is the verification and approval and preliminary approval in the early stages of design, and of course, and before the construction of the vessel. followed by the final approval of the technical file and certification when the vessel is completed and after the carrying out the sea trials. Regarding the required surveys, we have the initial survey, of course, before the ship is put into service. And then we might have a general or partial survey, a partial survey or a general survey, after we have a major conversion. In a new or in an existing ship, accordingly. And in cases we have an extended major conversion, we may apply, the administration may apply the reduction factor, this X factor I mentioned before, corresponding to the time phase when the conversion took place. For the ship energy efficient management plan, the verification is for existing ships, and it should be done in the first intermediate or renewal survey for the issuance of the International Air Pollution Prevention Certificate after, of course, 1st of June of 2013. After the initial survey, then the International Energy Efficiency Certificate, the IEEC certificate, is issued, and this certificate is valid throughout the life of the ship, and of course it is subject to withdrawal from service if a new certificate is issued, followed major conversion, or of course upon transfer of the ship to another flag. The post-state control inspections should be limited only to the verification of the existence of a valid International Energy Efficiency Certificate, and just that. Here we see the way ahead for IMO, the next steps. It's the EEDI framework for ship types and sizes and propulsion systems not covered yet by the current EEDI requirements. In this table, we see that you mentioned that there was no reference to passenger ships, ro-ro cargo ships, and ro-ro passenger ships because at the moment we don't have the relevant reference lines. Also, there are some issues how to determine the attained EEDI. Most probably for capacity, we will use the gross tonnage instead of deadweight as we use for commercial vessels. So we anticipate to have the outcome maybe in a couple of years after MEPC 66. Also, we have to consider of the EEDI calculation method for ships at the time excluded from the requirements. And I mean vessels having diesel-electric propulsion, turbine propulsion, and hybrid propulsion. And we expect to have something also in a couple of years regarding these issues. And of course, there are some other pending items, like the review of applicable requirements for small ship segments with linear reduction factor in Regulation 21, the review of EEDI for larger size segment of oil tankers and bulk carriers, and the review of technological developments and adjust the time period the reduction factor set out in phases 2 and 3. Finally, we have to consider CO2 abatement technologies, also to consider guidelines on propulsion power needed to maintain the maneuverability of the ship under adverse conditions, which is an item pointed out by our delegation as well. Hopefully, we have something in maybe 1 year. And finally, the identification and development of other guidelines or supporting documents for technical and operational measures, which is a procedure going on, and there are more discussions to be delivered on this issue. Thank you very much for your time and your attendance. Thank you.
Thank you very much.